Welcome to your licensure class in reading comprehension. Might be spending even the whole day here, who knows, yeah. But we are actually to let you know that for the reading comprehension, we're going to be looking at the instructional, the model reciprocal teaching. And I know that you received an article on Common Core standards that you were supposed to read and respond to as part of your 2-hour class, but that would be the half an hour. Problem is that the presenter who was supposed to be here for the Common Core, she couldn't make it, because they had canceled on the 22nd. So, you're still fine, just keep the article and your response. She would have had you, I think she had planned to do some sharing out with that. We're not going to. We were asked last week if we could come in and teach. We went, oh yeah, okay. So, yeah, one of those things. But my name, I'm Jean Lorzell, and I'm a 6th grade science teacher in the St. Francis district. And actually, Deb and I do teach a reciprocal teaching class, which is a 30-hour class in our district for professional development for teachers. So we just kind of pulled some things that we thought might be of interest to kind of give you an overview. Let's see, and my partner is?
Hi, I'm Deb Parson. I teach at the middle school as well. I teach 6th grade social studies, .5, and I am .5 release union president. And I also taught special ed for 14 years prior to becoming a social studies teacher, so I have a background in special ed as well as 6th grade.
We would just like to go around and just to kind of get a feel for where people are from and what age kids that you're working with. So if we could just get your name and where you work out of, or and what age kids that you're working with.
I'll start off. My name is Mike Stoffel. I teach here at St. Francis High School in the Language Arts Department.
Tracy Norton, also at the high school here in math. Heather Vincent, and I'm studying currently here, but my license is math secondary.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Rose Luffel, my licensure is art. I'm our teacher, but I'm currently subbing. I've just graduated from St. Cloud State.
I'm Julie Mauer. I'm licensed 5 to 12 English, but I am a sub in the district and elsewhere.
My name is Megan Cash. I'm licensed 5th through 12th grade language arts literature, and I'm subbing as well.
I'm Susan Hagerty. I'm the assistant principal here at the high school.
I'm Megan Ellis, and I am currently a stay-at-home mom, but my licensure is K6, top kindergarten.
Julie Hagemeyer. I teach physical education and adaptive physical education at Alberta Middle School.
I'm Heidi Wold. I teach 2nd grade at Cedar Creek in the district.
Sarah Sonovan. I'm K-12 art, and I was 9 years in Chisago, and now I'm doing a long-term sub. So lucky for a job.
Okay. Hi, Lori Rogenkamp. I teach at Elk River Schools. I am a K-5 music teacher there.
I'm Carol Scheffler. I'm a substitute in the Elk River School District. My licensure is, well, I actually have preschool through 5th grade, and then a specialist. Whatever I do.
She's my sub.
I do.
Dave Hanslick. My licensure is 5 through 12 health education. I currently work for an online health education curriculum company.
Jessica Smith, licensure K6, and I'm teaching 5th grade at Litchfield.
I'm Sarah Finnegan. I'm also teaching 5th grade in Litchfield.
I'm Kara Dahl. My license is kindergarten through 8th grade language arts for middle school. I'm currently subbing in the district, but I was a special ed EA here for 5 years, and I taught for a year. Taught elsewhere for a year, and so.
My name is Heidi Spoon. I taught kindergarten in Elk River, and now I stay home with my kids.
I'm Jill Job. I currently teach 2nd grade for Elk River. My licensure is pre-K to middle school, actually.
Okay. I'm Sharon Hilber, and I'm ESL.
And I'm Adam Hubley. I teach 1st grade in the Invergrove Heights district.
Oh, okay. Wow. Diverse group, boy, from all segments and ways of life. Awesome. Okay. Well, get going. Try to, we didn't turn the lights on because I think it probably is still a little bit hard to see the front here. But if you want, that's okay. If you want to get a folder with yeah, some yellow sheet up here, Deb. I'm not sure someone dropped it off. It's nice to have both for your work with. So when we talk about reciprocal teaching, it actually is a technique that can be used in the classroom that goes from being teacher-led to student-led. And it's built on the 4 different strategies, which are predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing. If you use reciprocal teaching in your classroom, or even some parts of it, they have said that it's not that these 4 strategies are the only ones. You'd of course want to bring in other things like kids making connections and visualizing, and but this is kind of the core to reciprocal teaching. And if we look at what we're planning on doing is looking at each one of these and just giving you some ideas, present some activities that maybe you could do with your class. And as teachers are teachers, we look at something and go, oh, I like that, but I probably have to tweak it or I have to do it a little bit, modify it, and which is great. So if we could give you at least one thing that you could leave this hour-and-a-half session with, that would be awesome for us. When you think about predicting, predicting is really a good skill for our kids to do because it activates their prior knowledge. And also, when they look at the title or pictures, they can predict what they think it was going to be about. And it actually gives them a purpose for their reading, and they can confirm or deny. Oh yeah, I was right on. Or, no, boy, my prediction was really off because the title threw me. The next one we have is questioning. And questioning, being a teacher seems to be kind of automatic. You ask a question, the students answer it. It's pretty, day to day, that's what you do. But when we have students do it, they really need to be looking for that information that is going to be good enough for a question. And then the other part is that they have to pose the question using that information. And what I've found is when I've been even observing like high school teachers, and they tell their students to come up with a question. Kids are kind of floundering because teachers always ask the questions, students always give the answers. And when they're asked to come up with a question, they're, well, because we want them to be higher level. More seem to come up with just kind of that basic question. So we'll be talking about that. Also, clarifying. When you ask a student to clarify what they've read, or can they understand it, they think that it's just, I read it, I'm done with it. Yeah, but did you understand it? Can you tell me what's going on? No. For them, clarifying is just, I can read it. I could read all the words, but we know that doesn't always mean that they understand it. So when we clarify, it's more or less saying, what are the vocabulary words that you have difficulty with? Are there some ideas or concepts? When I'm teaching in my science class and I'm reading the text before I offer it to students, I go, whoa, they kind of skip around. It's hard to make those connections or links together. And so, we need to teach, kids need to know what they can do to help them clarify and those fix-up strategies. For example, if I'm reading something in my science book that I'm going to present to my kids the next day, one of my fix-up strategies is I tend to read it out loud so I can kind of hear it, see is it making sense to me, so that I can help my kids. So clarifying is really more, you know, why is this difficult for me and how can I understand what I'm reading. The last part of reciprocal teaching strategy is summarizing. And of course that's where, you know, we're trying to pull the important information, you know, what's the big idea. If you teach primary kids or, you know, stay-at-home mom with those young kids, and you say, well, tell me, you know, what happened? They will give you from the beginning to the end, every single little detail. Whereas, you know, when we summarize, we really want the big ideas and the gist of what it was about. So to have kids being able to recognize the big ideas and pull those out is an important part of them being able to comprehend or understand what they've been reading. So any questions on that? No? Okay.
All right, on the outside of your folder, you'll find 2 Post-it notes. You will need 1 Post-it note, and on the inside, you'll see the moonwalking article. We're going to do a little activity on the predicting, which is one of the, people feel, one of the easiest of the 4 strategies to teach and both for the kids to pick up on. So I'm going to walk you through this little activity. It's called moonwalking, and I'm going to ask that you don't read the article. In predicting, you want to just scan it. So on the Post-it note, make just a quick prediction on what you think this article is going to be about. 1 sentence or 1 short statement. What do you think this article is going to be about? Alright, I'm going to give you my prediction and explain to you how I got the prediction. I am positive that this article is going to be about Michael Jackson. And I can prove it because the title of the article is Moonwalking. When I scanned it, in the 2nd paragraph down, his name is in there. His name Michael. And to the right-hand side, the top line right under the picture, Colombian. I know he did a world tour and stopped in Colombia. So I don't even actually need to read this article because I already know what it's going to be about. Okay, how many of you agree with me that that's what this article is going to be about? Okay, I don't have any takers. Can I get somebody to share out what they wrote on their Post-it note? Yep.
The astronauts, plural possessive, walk on the moon.
Okay. Anybody else have something about astronauts walking on the moon? Yeah. Anybody have anything different?
Just how it feels to be up there in space.
Okay, something about space. We've got walking on the moon, we've got space.
Working in the short history of the space program.
Okay. Nobody even close to what I said. I backed mine up with facts. Can anybody else back theirs up with some facts?
Image?
Yeah.
Oh, so you looked at the picture. Okay, fine. Anything else?
Spacecraft.
Okay.
Caption underneath the picture.
All right. How many of you had asked kids to make predictions about something and were more close to what I made for a prediction than yours? Okay. Predicting is just that. You're just making an educated guess. What we need to move our kids into is it is an educated guess. You look at the pictures, you read the captions. You don't read the article word for word, you scan it, but you look for the words that are brought to your attention. They might be italicized, they might be bold. Dates typically jump out, especially in a nonfiction article. Now, we also have, if you see up here, Jean went through the four strategies in reciprocal teaching. You have a Post-it note, and the reason I asked you to put it on a Post-it note is in class, this is kind of tight quarters, so I'm not going to ask you all to get up and walk up here, but when I do this in class, you'll have a partner, you'll decide whose prediction is probably the closest, and put a Post-it note up here. This is also a reminder for the teacher to come back and review the predictions to you know, justify and to see who is closest, to remind them that predictions change as you read. I love to read mystery, like murder mysteries, James Patterson, that type of thing. I'm making predictions all the time. And sometimes I'm spot on, I know who did it right away, and other times I'm way off. But as an adult and as a good reader, I always go back and modify my predictions. Younger kids, well, even the older kids, I was observing in a language arts classroom here at the high school, and some of the predictions they made were closer to my Michael Jackson than they were to your astronaut. And once they made the prediction, check that off, they were done. They never went back and modified their prediction. All right. Oh, I can't even read that from here. This, again, it just involves previewing the text to see what happens next, and you should always go back and modify it, but it also sets a purpose for the reading. Now that you think you know what it's about, I think I know what it's about, it engages us to read it and figure out who might be more accurate or close to it. A good example of predictors are weathermen. They use, now, I would love to be able to have their job and have their percentage of accuracy and still get paid what they do, but they look at clues around them all the time and try to make educated guesses or predictions on what the weather is going to be like. And I found if I don't like their prediction, I change the channel and listen to somebody else's.
I like their 50% chance of isolated showers.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that.
So that's a pretty good standby. Again, when it's a expository text like the one I gave you, text features are really important. Science books, health books. Again, the text features such as the bold print, the headings, the labels, the charts, the graphs. So when you're using expository text, you want to look at all those things. Narrative, how many of you have done the Story Mountain type of thing? So those help with the predicting, and to know the key elements help you develop the character along with that. All right. When making predictions, students just kind of throw stuff out there. What we really encourage is for the justification. I think this is going to be about Michael Jackson because, and I was able to list some reasons or some facts that I found that I thought supported my prediction quite well. Or I'll bet, but you always follow it up with a because you want the students to justify it. That typically limits the just wild guesses, and they go on. There's 2 math teachers at the middle school who use this. They actually, excuse me, use this whole strategy within their math curriculum when they're working on word problems. And predicting is a huge part because what operation do you think you're going to use to solve this problem? So then they put the operation over here. What do you need to know? What information are you not clear on? And then this is their workspace. So we've seen math teachers really take this and go crazy with it. There are some problems, as I exhibited, with the predicting. Again, some crazy just guesses without backing it up. Not going back to modify your predicting is also a problem. Some ways to help that are what I just did with you. Model it out loud. Do think alouds using text that the students will be using. Work in small groups or in pairs and then go back. Oh. So predicting is the jump off point or the starting point for getting kids into the text and setting that goal. But keep in mind, you always want to go back and let them know it's okay. One, it's okay to be wrong, obviously. And it's even better to modify and adjust as you go along to make sure that when I read my novels, I don't stick with that one character that I know did it. And I modify as I go along. So you want to let kids model that for kids that, you know what, we were way off on the Michael Jackson thing. I agree with you guys that it probably wasn't. And maybe we should read to find out. All right. Jean?
Yes, okay. Next, we talked about, after predicting, then questioning. And really, when we read something through the reading process, good readers are going to ask questions. You know, if you think about yourself when you're reading something, you know, there's sometimes I'll go, oh, I did read that, and I don't understand a word I said, because I just made it through it, just like the kids do. But, you know, sometimes if I'm reading a story and something comes up, and I go, wait a minute, how'd that happen? I'll go back, and oh, I missed that part in the story, so okay, now that makes sense. But, you know, we ask questions, but actually making those questions up is very difficult for students. And when we talk about reciprocal teaching, what we basically are getting at is that we would have like groups of kids, groups of 4, and that they could run the show, so to speak, where they get the opportunity to predict about something they're going to be reading, and they question, and then they clarify, and then they summarize. So it's kind of a process there. And but during the discussions, when they're reading a text, then they need to come up with a question, and that can be kind of difficult for them. So there's one way that we kind of wanted to share with you was, well, we're going to share with you. I want you to take out, in your folder, you should have just a short little article on Egypt, the gift of the Nile. And so if you could just read this article to yourself, and then I'm going to be asking you about posing a question. Is everyone done reading? So I'm going to introduce you to something that teachers seem to like. It's called the Q chart, which would be the question chart. And we have, and don't worry, you have a handout about this, and then we're going to get to that in just a minute, so you don't need a copy of this if you're interested in it. We have the who, what, where, when, why, and how, going vertically, and then horizontally is, did, can, would, will, might. And so this can be kind of like a question launcher, question stem, where, you know, they could when, did, and coming up with a when, did question, or why, will, okay? And so what I would like you to do is, and there's a reason we'll kind of get into that, actually it's kind of laid out into 4 different quadrants. And what I would like you to do is I'm going to assign people a quadrant, and I want you to use any word combinations from one vertical and one horizontal and come up with a question. So if you were, I assigned you to quadrant 1, you could do what is from the Egypt article, or pose a question where did, or when can, okay? And if you are a quadrant 2 person, it would be, you know, when will, or where might, what would. So you can choose, have your question start anywhere with 2 words. Quadrant 3 would be why did, why is, how can, and then quadrant 4 would be why would, how will, why might. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to have on your post-it note, the other one that you have, quadrant 1, and then I'll have Julie in the last row, you can be quadrant 2, okay? And then quadrant 3 will be this row, and then the last 2 rows are quadrant, oh, yeah, you're quadrant 4. So if you could think of a question, pose it, and then I'd like you to bring your post-it note up, and you don't have to put it, oh, I had a where did question. You can put it anywhere in the quadrant. In fact, I might have to go off a little bit. So pose your question, and then if you could just bring it up and put it in whatever quadrant it goes to. Get you up and move it.
Have to be very obviously answered in the article?
Might not be able to be.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be?
No.
Okay.
But it, you know, it should pertain to, you know, what the article's about.
It can't necessarily be a projection or an opinion?
Could be. Could be. Which we'll be talking about this because, you know, there are those questions that are pretty basic.
Right.
And then as we go through, like Bloom's taxonomy, moving higher up the scale.
Spend an hour outside. No, mom and dad benefits of family and then they had a sheet well, I remember.
What?
No, we have this
Most of the questions are all posted then. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to read some. I'm not going to read them all, but from the first quadrant, we have what did the Egyptians grow? What did a Greek historian once call Egypt? Where's the start of the Nile River? Okay, so kind of your basic questions there, kind of the factual information. Then we have quadrant 2. What might your occupation be if you lived there? Where will the Nile River empty into? would the Egyptians grow on their farms? Who would work on the farms? So, you know, still using kind of that information, but worded so that, you know, it's probably not real straightforward, have to think about a little bit, kind of think and search.
All right.
Right, we're gonna work together because
But I read the great gap. But I got more out of it.
All right. We are going to do a couple of things through this activity. We will be doing the AB, the partner share. So I will stop at certain points throughout the book. I'm going to redo a book. Precious. You're going to stop through very strategic parts, and I'll say partner A, and I'll pose a question. Here's the rule. If you're the one speaking, the other person is listening. There's only two rules. You either speak or you listen. You can't respond to what the partner is saying.
We're reading Camus today. That's awesome.
It's just an awesome book. All right, so we're going to do the pair share strategy, clarifying obviously where I'm going to stop in very strategic places and clarify. The importance here is you want to stop and clarify things that enhance the story, bring the student's attention to where you want it to be, not just add detail. Sometimes you stop and pose a question, and it might be a good question, but it doesn't enhance the understanding of the story, and it might lead them down a different path. Okay, so here we go. The story, oh boy. The story I'm going to read today is The Stranger. Has anybody read this one before? It's one of my favorite books. All right. When I do this with the students, obviously I read it ahead of time, but I put Post-it notes in and I label it, because you'd be surprised once you get reading, you forget, was it A, was it B, and if it's a group of three, do you say C or do you go back to? So I always write it down with the group or the partner. Oh boy, it's hard to see.
That's not going to happen. It's just,
yeah, it's the light,
sun's always
isn't it?
going to rise on these things.
All right. All right. It was the time of year Farmer Bailey liked best. When summer turned to fall, he whistled as he drove along. A cool breeze blew across his face through the truck's open window. Then it happened. There was a loud thump. Mr. Bailey jammed on his brakes. Oh no, he thought, I've hit a deer. Partner A, have any of you been in a vehicle when a deer was hit?
I've not been.
Yes. So we're supposed to answer?
Oh no, he thought, I've hit a deer. But it wasn't a deer the farmer found lying on the road, it was a man. Mr. Bailey knelt down beside the still figure, fearing the worst. Then suddenly the man opened his eyes. He looked up with terror and jumped to his feet. He tried to run off, lost his balance, and fell down. He got up again, but this time the farmer took his arm and helped him to the truck. Mr. Bailey drove home. He helped the stranger inside, where Mrs. Bailey made him comfortable on the parlor sofa. Partner B, discuss with your partner what you think parlor sofa is. Where Mrs. Bailey made him comfortable on the parlor sofa. Partner B, would somebody like to share out what they think a parlor sofa is? Yes, ma'am.
Couch in a living room.
And what would make you say that?
Because I know that a couch and a sofa are the same thing.
Okay. Katie, their daughter, peeked into the room. The man on the sofa was dressed in odd, rough leather clothing. She heard her father whisper, "Must be some kind of hermit." Hermit. Partner either A or C. What do you think a hermit is?
Someone that is not as fluent as they are, or well off.
She heard her father whisper, "Must be some kind of hermit." When I'm reading this, I still can't figure out what hermit is, so I'm going to try the strategy of reading on because I tried what we talked about before, rereading, going back, looking at words around there, and I still couldn't figure out, so I'm going to read on. Must be some kind of hermit. Sort of fellow who lives alone in the woods. Well, partner A or C. Were you correct on what you thought a hermit was? Okay? No. The stranger didn't seem to understand the questions Mr. Bailey asked him. "I don't think," whispered Miss Bailey, "he knows how to talk." Mr. Bailey called the doctor, who came and listened to the stranger's heart, felt his bones, looked in his eyes, and took his temperature. He decided the man had lost his memory. There was a bump on the back of his head. "In a few days," the doctor said, "he should remember who he is and where he's from." Mrs. Bailey stopped the doctor as he left the house. He had forgotten his thermometer. "Oh, you can throw that out," he answered. "It's broken. The mercury is stuck on the bottom." Partner B, thermometer, the phrase thermometer, and the mercury is stuck on the bottom. What does this mean, and what would that have to do with the story? Oh, you can throw that away. It's broken. The mercury is stuck in the bottom. I want you to hold on to the discussion you just had, and that's going to help you at the end of the story. So just hang on to that discussion there. Mr. Bailey lent the stranger some clean clothes. The fellow seemed confused about buttonholes and buttons. In the evening, he joined the Baileys for dinner. The steam that rose from the hot food fascinated him. He watched Katie take a spoonful of soup and blow gently across it. Then he did exactly the same thing. Mrs. Bailey shivered. "Brr," she said, "there's a draft in here tonight." Partner A, why do you think Miss Bailey felt a draft when the stranger blew across his soup?
I would put those two together, yes, but maybe she's just a little worried about the stranger in her house, being with her husband and child. I don't know how this is so maybe there wasn't a draft. Maybe she's just her kind of...
Brr, there's a draft in here tonight. Partner A, is there anyone who would like to share their guess on why she felt a draft?
I think it's a ghost.
Oh, it's an alien.
The undead. Or the dead.
Yeah.
The living.
The living dead. Zombie.
The next morning, Katie watched the stranger from her bedroom window. He walked across the yard toward two rabbits. Instead of running into the woods, the rabbits took a hop in his direction. He picked one of them up and stroked the ears, then set it down. The rabbits hopped away, then stopped and looked back as if they expected the stranger to follow him. When Katie's father went into the field that day, the stranger shyly tagged along. Mr. Bailey gave him a pitchfork and with a little practice, he learned to use it well. They worked hard. Occasionally, Mr. Bailey would have to stop and rest, but the stranger never tired. He didn't even sweat. Partner A, why do you think the stranger never did sweat? Partner A or C?
I think he's a black student, doesn't he have a bunny transformed into a human. And bunnies don't sweat. They have, it's like a dog maybe, and they have sweat in their tongue.
I'm still going. He's very friendly. To make contact.
But the stranger never tired. He didn't even sweat. That evening, Katie sat with the stranger watching the setting sun. High above them, a flock of geese, in a perfect V formation, flew south on the trip they made every fall. The stranger could not take his eyes off the birds. He stared at them like a man who'd been hypnotized. 2 weeks passed, and the stranger still could not remember who he was, but the Baileys didn't mind. They liked having the stranger around. He had become one of the family. Day by day, he had grown less timid. He seemed so happy to be around us, Mr. Bailey said to his wife. It's hard to believe that he's a hermit. Partner B or C, what from the picture makes you think that the stranger is happy?
Could you read a little louder?
Yeah. It's hard to believe that he is a hermit. Another week passed. Farmer Bailey could not help notice how peculiar the weather had been. Not long ago, it seemed that autumn was just around the corner. But now, it still felt like summer, as if the seasons couldn't change. The warm days made the pumpkins grow larger than ever. The leaves on the trees were as green as they were 3 weeks before. Does anyone have an idea, partner B, what peculiar means? Partner B, would anybody like to take or share their guess on what peculiar means? Yes, ma'am.
It means strange because weird things were happening.
Nice. Nice tying it back into what we've read already. One day, the stranger climbed the highest hill on the Bailey farm. He looked to the north and saw a puzzling sight. The trees in the distance were bright red and orange, but the trees in the south, like those around the Baileys, were nothing but shades of green. They seemed so drab and ugly to the stranger. It would be much better, he thought, if all the trees could be red and orange. The stranger's feelings grew stronger the next day. He couldn't look at the tree's green leaves without sensing that something was terribly wrong. The more he thought about it, the more upset he became, until finally he could think of nothing else. He ran to the tree and pulled off a leaf. He held it in his trembling hand, and without thinking, he blew on it with all of his might. At dinner that evening, the stranger appeared dressed in his old leather clothes. By the tears in his eyes, the Baileys could tell that their friend had decided to leave. He hugged them all once, then dashed out the door. The Baileys hurried outside to wave goodbye, but the stranger disappeared. The air had turned cold, and the leaves on the trees were no longer green. Partner B, make a prediction. Why do you think the trees turn color so fast? The air had turned cold, and the leaves on the trees were no longer green. Partner B, would somebody share out why did the leaves turn so fast? Yes, sir.
Because he was Old Man Winter, and he was making up for lost time.
Anybody on that same page, so to speak?
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Same page? All right. Every autumn since the stranger's visit, the same thing happens at the Bailey's farm. The trees that surround it stay green for a week after the trees to the north have turned. Then, overnight, they change their color to the brightest of all trees around. And etched in frost on the farmhouse windows are the words that simply say, "See you in the fall." Partner A, who do you think the stranger is? And support it with because statements.
Oh, great. I guess in the fall. Yeah, a lot more fun. It wasn't like he was either a teacher and killed him. Somebody liked
And etched in the farmhouse window were the words that simply say, "See you next fall."
He can't speak, how can he write?
Let's make some predictions here. Who do you think this was? Partner A. We have Old Man Winter was one prediction.
Father's
Jack Frost.
Jack Frost.
Well, we changed our mind though, from alien to God.
God.
But if he couldn't speak, how could he write the words on the window?
He's God.
Yeah.
It
doesn't.
This
is true.
It could be mute.
That's very true. The only you guys have mentioned all of them except for the other one we hear is what? I just asked. Father Time. Did you guys say Father Time? Father Time was the other one.
If you didn't know any of those, I mean, you would think magic or, you know, because you would have to have some kind of background knowledge of all of those.
Absolutely.
And if you didn't as a student, you would just be like,
Right.
Or they would make a prediction like it could be a vampire because, you know,
Yeah.
they're not alive anymore.
Yes.
They have magic power.
Maybe
It's
it's a
Harry
little
Potter.
girl writing to him. Well, and this is where the story ends. There's no, you never know for sure. So the end. No. So people, I use this book to do exactly to start some discussions and make some thought-provoking. When I stopped and asked, "Who do you think it is?" or the thermometer, as good readers and as adults, I would guarantee you flash back to some of those things. Now, what do you think the thermometer means? Blowing on the soup. What do you think that means? So, as good readers, we do that naturally, but as we're teaching students to be more strategic in their reading, this is a wonderful book to stop. It does frustrate people when I can't say at the end, it is. So, it's your best guess.
And we were talking about the thermometer. I have mercury thermometers in my house still, but I don't know that kids now would know what they are. So even to say, well, what's the significance of it, they have to know what it is first.
If I was using this with the little kids, that is not, I would have done a think aloud there. A thermometer, I know what that is, and I would have talked them through. I would have used the think aloud strategy there. As adults, I was hoping you guys all knew what mercury thermometers did. But, so you're absolutely right. Had this been a itty bitties, I would have used a different strategy.
I don't even know if 7th and 8th graders know what a mercury thermometer is.
You would have a lot of different feel those, the estrogen, you know, temperature thermometer.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't also fit with the, but yeah, there's a lot of background information there that's necessary. But I can see, like, using this with my 9th grade students and my predictions, I crumpled up my little post-it note, and the first thing I thought was like, oh, well, he's describing a scarecrow. You run into a man, and, you know, he's not hurt afterwards, and then you see his other pictures, and you go, oh, well, he's got all, and I kept crows. And you're doing that all mentally, but to get your kids to realize that their predictions have to change throughout the course of the story, this would be I mean, fantastic for that. It's not a static thing. It's something that has to change with the information that students.
It's almost like I paid you and planted you in class. I'll slide you a check later.
Are you coming to the next two sections too?
No. I get all my reading in.
All right. The last strategy we're going to talk about is summarizing. This book, again, if you had another post-it note, I would ask you to write a one-sentence summary, which is another strategy we teach, the one-sentence summary. Like Jean said, kids, they want to give you the play-by-play beginning to end, so forcing them to summarize into one sentence is very difficult. So put it on a post-it, limits the space, plus saying one sentence limits the amount. So this is a great book to do that as well. All right, Jean?
Towards the end,
one other thing that I did want to draw your attention to is, kind of that activity and the pairing up with the AB, was when you're reading, if you noticed, Deb didn't say, are you guys all done? Did everybody share out? Are you, can I continue? Or quiet, I'm going to keep reading. She just kind of read the last sentence of what she had read and then just kind of continued on. And it's interesting because in class when I do that, at first they're kind of, people are still talking and I'm just reading. Shh, she started reading again. And it's a really great technique to use because you don't have to, hey, you guys quiet down, haven't you, and be that. You just read and then, they all kind of, it falls into place. They learned very quickly though, didn't they, Deb?
They did, yeah.
She's reading again, better stop and gotta focus, so, just to let you know about that. Then our last strategy in reciprocal teaching is summarizing. And when we have students summarize, they really need to recall the information and pick out those big ideas. Like I said, if you have primary kids or your own young kids, when you ask them to, well, what did you do? You get the whole thing. So, it's really important for kids to be able to summarize because evidence shows that for them to kind of construct an overall understanding about what they've read, summarizing is important. And I've seen where, I know even in first grade when I've been observing teachers, well, we're going to try this, but and the students can't write anything down, it's more verbal, and so they're trying to get their ideas across that way. But, whether it's the text, the whole story, a chapter, an article, just a paragraph, you can certainly do summarizing. It's not limited to, oh, it's got to be something really big. And so with younger kids, can definitely, just take a paragraph. Oh, what was that about? And when they start talking about everything, no, just what was it about? Kind of that big idea, have them start thinking that way. What I'd like you to do then is if you could take out the Egypt article again, and hopefully you've got a highlighter. If you didn't grab one, you can certainly, okay, pass around. So if everyone could just get a highlighter. And this is another activity that you could do for summarizing. So we have the article and your highlighter. What I'd like you to do is, using the highlighter, kind of go through the article. You've read it once, but go through it, and I want you to highlight 3 important words or ideas that you come across while you're reading. And if you're like me, you highlight this, highlight that. Oh, wait, that's kind of an important word too. So try to limit it to just 3. If you highlight important words, then maybe you just want to pick from those. But we want 3 3 words, highlight them, and then take those important words and on the back side, write a sentence that would kind of connecting them all together, kind of your summary of the article.
Are they words or phrases?
You can choose either words or ideas or phrases would be fine. So, because sometimes, you know, the.